Thank you so much for joining us today, and to our guests here today. Welcome to Founders Week YQG. My name is Shreya Sheth. I'm the Manager of Programs and Events at WEtech Alliance, and thank you all for joining us in this event that brings together entrepreneurs, startups, innovators, changemakers, entrepreneurial support organization, local leaders, and community. It warms my heart to see the Windsor Essex entrepreneurship ecosystem interacting really well. While this event is virtual, we would like to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. We are grateful to work, learn, and live in this area. This week would not have been possible without our generous sponsors, so I would just like to take a second to thank them. The Province of Ontario, St. Clair College Alumni Association, the Job Shop, Libro Credit Union, Workforce Windsor Essex, Baker Tilly Windsor LLP, Alpha Core Group, Venturit, EPICentre, the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Center, Genesis Entrepreneurship Center, and WEtech Alliance. Thank you for putting #Founders first. For more information about our sponsors, please check out wetech-alliance.com/foundersweek. Today's session is hosted by WEtech Alliance. WEtech Alliance is one of 17 regional innovation centers funded by the province of Ontario, serving the Windsor, Essex, and Chatham-Kent regions. We provide entrepreneurs with business services, training, mentorship, and strategic connections to help bring new ideas to market, scale to the next level, and build a dynamic culture and a community of innovation. To learn more about what we do and how we can help, please register for the Leveraging the Windsor Essex Entrepreneurship Support Ecosystem workshop today at 3 p.m. So on to a couple of housekeeping items. Today we are leveraging Zoom webinar. You may not be able to see all the attendees, but you will have ample opportunity to engage with our guests during the Q&A session. So please feel free to use the chat feature at the bottom of your video screen to engage with our session attendees. And please feel free to post questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen for our speakers here today. And should you experience any technical difficulties, please send us a message in the chat box. Additionally, this session will be recorded, so video, audio file, and relevant links will be available on WEtech Alliance's YouTube channel and included in our attendee follow-up email. If you experience any technical difficulties, we are also streaming the session live on the WEtech Alliance's Facebook page. And finally, let's make sure everyone knows Founders Week YQG is where it's at. So be sure to share your #Founders Week YQG experience on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And we have created custom shareable GIFs for the event to amplify your Instagram stories. So in the GIF search bar, please look up WEtech Alliance to find the custom GIFs for this event. Now I would like to welcome our moderator, Bekim Merdita, to the stage. Bekim is the Vice President of Sales and Business Development at Edison Financial. He is a mortgage industry leader and leads teams in the US as well as Canada. On behalf of Founders Week YQG, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm a hard G guy on the GIF. I see John Mark in the comments over there. It's an age-old debate, so it really, you could fall on either side of it from what I understand. But
apparently, the founder or the creator of the actual tech said it was a soft G. Just saying.
Really?
But
you've gotten that deep into the archives to find out? Okay.
Yeah.
It's our office joke. So before I embarrass myself further, I will take myself off the screen.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you very much for having us. Appreciate you, teeing us up here to get started. I am Bekim, as she mentioned. I'm going to be moderating in a way. It's going to be interesting as I work with Hash on a daily basis. So through all of our dealings on a daily basis, so I've never gotten the privilege to interview you, Hash. It's going to be exciting.
I kind of imagine this just being a regular continuation of our witty banter, though. So it feels just like a
Right.
normal day.
Right. That's right. Except we can't argue in front of people. So
On
thank
front
you.
of kids.
That's right. Thanks to all the attendees as well. Of course, WEtech for having us on, for all the sponsors who have sponsored this event. That's amazing, and we're happy to be a part of it. Hash, we're gonna start off with a little bit of rapid fire, so I hope you're ready to go. What is something you couldn't live without?
I'm actually going to go with two things, and they go together. I'm going to say coffee and reading material. It's pretty much how I start every morning. I think the combination of the two is pretty much essential.
Okay, perfect. And then what's your favorite book?
Again, I'm going to go with maybe a couple of favorites here. You being a voracious reader as well, I feel like picking just one would be hard. I'm going to go with A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. Amazing history of his time living in Paris. How Will You Measure Your Life by Clayton Christensen, wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, but also this amazing book about applying business strategy to leading a happy life. I should add one more, Fooled by Randomness, just an incredible book on all the ways in which humans get the world wrong.
A little Nicholas Nassim Taleb, huh?
Right, yeah.
I'm a big fan as well. So let's pause and let's talk about you a little bit. So founder, president of Edison Financial, right? Venture capital, turned mortgage, turned people leader. Tell us about yourself, Hash.
All right. I mean, where do I start here? I'm 33, recently engaged, actually, which is exciting. I started off in investment banking with RBC in 2008. Really, really great time to join capital markets. So I started off in Toronto with RBC, then moved over to the UK. It's actually starting to sound a bit like a dating profile, so I'm sorry about that. But I started to get the urge to move out of traditional finance. Moved into venture capital in 2010 with a firm called Vantage Capital, which was founded by the former president of Electronic Arts. We really focused on gaming originally, and then again started chomping at the bit. Wanted to start my own business. Co-founded a business called Conconi Growth Partners with a good friend of mine by the name of Alex Conconi in 2018. Since then, we've gone on to invest in over 70 startups and launched a private mortgage lender called Neighborhood Holdings, which is how I got into the mortgage business. Today, those two businesses manage about 500 million in assets combined. And around the same time, Alex started a business called Lendesk Technologies. And in 2008, I became CFO of Lendesk right around the time it was bought by Rocket Companies. And shortly thereafter, I met a man by the name of Chad Weinbaum, 22-year veteran of Quicken Loans. We started talking about combining the best of Lendesk and the best of Quicken Loans, and really Edison was a product of that. We launched Edison in 2019. Edison, as some people might have heard, is a digital mortgage brokerage. You and I, of course, met in early 2019 as well. It was really an incredibly fortuitous, I think, opportunity for both of us coming together to be able to launch this business in Windsor. And it's been, quite the ride ever since. Yeah.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. And if that was your dating profile and I wasn't married, I'd be interested. For the record, that's a lot of good stuff.
Would you swipe right?
I would swipe right on that profile.
Right.
So what's a business that you wish you founded, right? You've started all these different companies. In fact, being venture capital, and you've got to see all these different companies. If it weren't for Edison, what do you wish you'd founded?
I feel like saying a business like Apple or something like that would be an easy one. I'm going to go slightly different. I'm going to say IKEA, which I feel is like the original Apple. It's a design-driven company that just people love or hate, which I think also applies to Apple. And I think has really leveraged not only amazing product design, but also genius logistics to create scale and an incredible moat. And I just think that's going to be one of the most enduring businesses. And they just continue to expand in all sorts of interesting ways.
So when you relate that to mortgage, and you think about, a business like IKEA and the mortgage business that we're in today, what are some things that you think we could learn from IKEA and apply to the mortgage industry?
Interesting question. I mean, I think that scale is an obvious one. Like the furniture business, the mortgage business is one that benefits immensely from scale. Just given that it's increasingly becoming a pretty global business, it's highly competitive. You need that scale to be able to offer clients both service wherever they want to be, but also low costs. I think another hallmark of IKEA is that interoperability. It's random, Hallstatt screws fit, a chair, they fit a table, they fit a bunch of things. And I think in many ways, whether it's the mortgage business or others, being able to think not in silos, but being able to apply insights and tools and technology across many parts of the business is almost just essential. And sort of breaking down those silos and really thinking about it holistically. Those are sort of two obvious ones for me that just seem so appropriate today.
Love that. And a Hallstatt reference to go with it.
Yeah, I don't even know if that's a thing, but it sounds like a thing.
It just took the cake. Yeah, it would be 2 A's on the back end as well.
Sure,
so,
yeah. I once attended one of those like beer quiz nights, and one of the categories was, is this an IKEA product or a Game of Thrones character? Surprisingly difficult, actually.
I believe that. So let's talk about advice. You've been fortunate, like you said. I mean, you've worked with a couple industry leaders now as well. What's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
One that stands out to me was given to me by one of the partners at this venture capital fund, a man by the name of Glenn Entis, who to this day is one of the most interesting people I've ever met. He's an Academy Award-winning animator, one of the pioneers of the animation industry, went into gaming, incredibly intelligent, well-read, and just so insightful, so down to earth. And we were literally standing in the kitchen, and I don't even know how it came up, but what he said, our greatest strength is also often our biggest weakness because we overplay our hand. And what he meant by that is that, this idea that perhaps someone who's smart and who's derived much of their success and their confidence from their intelligence tends to lean on that skill too heavily and maybe rely on intelligence where it's not appropriate, like where gut or emotion might make more sense. And most people see that right away. Someone who's really come to trust their intelligence and rely on it for their success will try to apply, just brute force intelligence to a spot that's totally inappropriate. And I think that applies to people that are, maybe funny, maybe using humor where it's inappropriate, any sorts of, it applies to many qualities in life, but we just tend to overplay that hand and over rely on it. And I think to sort of keeping in mind that tends to be where our greatest weakness lies as well. And then, learning to adapt.
Yes. As you know, I'm an avid reader, and I'm rereading Adam Grant's book right now, which is Think Again. I think it was his most recent one. And it talks a lot about that, right? When you know a lot about a subject, how you can get so confident, so overly confident in a subject and be willing to spit things out before you actually take a second, pause and think. He goes to these concepts about preachers and prosecutors. And you can become a preacher or prosecutor on a subject without ever taking a step back and thinking through why you feel a certain way. It's based on past tense beliefs and experience, right? Yeah. So I think it's phenomenal advice.
Great point.
Yeah. So it's no secret that we're living in a pandemic right now, and we have actually had to make some pretty significant pivots. Something interesting, just fun fact about Edison, we launched March of 2020 really officially. We were like, I remember sitting back watching the news in the office, and we're like, this thing, I think it's coming. I think it's coming here. And in 12 days, 13-ish days later, We had taken the small team we had, we dispersed to our homes, we started working from home, and our mission of building the business never went away, but we had to evolve. And I'm curious, you know, I try to replay it in my mind all the time, Hash, but when you think about some of the evolution of Edison that's taken place, in what ways do you see us as evolved? And what do you think are some things we maybe did well and some things that we did not so well that we're still working at?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Sometimes it's been such a busy year and a half that sometimes I forget to look back and reflect on that. I think one of the things that we did well from the get-go was really we had really set out to build this business as a remote business, not necessarily in terms of the sense that everyone working remote, but be able to deliver our service remotely to clients where they didn't have to come in to our front door and, you know, sign papers. So that, you know, that was a crux of the business. And obviously that proved to be really effective when some lenders and brokers were still trying to figure out how to operate a digital signature, you know, that was built into the core of our business. So that was obviously a big advantage. I think another one was a focus on people and development. The pandemic was really hard for a lot of people. I think sometimes we can look back and, you know, I'm even sometimes now looking back at the nostalgia about how much Netflix I could watch guilt-free. I was convinced I was helping the world by watching reruns of How I Met Your Mother. I was doing my part. But you know, there was a lot of uncertainty about, you know, the way things are going, about where business was going. And so, you know, the team building activities that we did, you know, the support, the leadership, the coaching, you know, lots of communication, I think helped people get through a very difficult time in many ways. And our team thrived as a result of it. We grew tremendously. And I think in retrospect, that was probably the best thing that we did.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think some businesses are better set up for these things, right? We are, you know, our early days, we had these goals of establishing a business that could be operated in that fashion.
Yeah.
And then overnight, we had to operate in that fashion.
Yeah.
So in some ways, we're prepared well from at least a technology perspective, but from a people perspective, I would say that's been the biggest challenge, right?
Agreed. Even just the logistics. I mean, this is kind of where we benefit as a startup, having the backing of rocket companies. Even there's the logistics of mailing people laptops, screens, getting them, you know, a discount on a decent chair where they're not going to be like, how many people sat at their dining room table for 6 months on a tiny laptop, you know, doing one of these. Yeah, it's
first,
yeah, it's you know, I think that making those investments early on and being able to deliver for people an at-home working experience that was scalable was just essential.
I agreed. I think that going into you know, 2022 and beyond, hybrid is going to be, you know, a thing. You know, and constantly thinking about ways. It's actually easier in some ways to be fully remote or fully physical office, right? Hybrid is actually the hardest part to figure it out.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And it's so subtle. It's actually as simple as the latency on video calls. You know, if you have some people in the room and then you're on video. I mean, it used to be the case before the pandemic that if you were the only one on video, then, you know, you're on someone's phone, on speaker, and you're like trying to get it to work edgewise, they forget to dial you in. Now that there's a mix, there's a little bit better, but still there's a dynamic where, you know, on video, you're already a couple seconds behind. So you never get that really smooth jump into the conversations. You're always trying to interrupt. And that kind of making that collaboration work in hybrid, I think is going to be one of the battlegrounds that are going to make businesses really successful or not. And I think people are going to choose where they want to work based on their ability to be remote or hybrid.
Yeah, funny story about that is I remember the very first meeting I held upon our return to the physical office in Windsor earlier this year. And we had one remote person on that team who was supposed to be on the call, but I did this like a stand up here. And all the way, this person was sitting in their Teams window waiting for all of us to join, and the other 7 people like held the whole meeting. I get back to my desk and I've got all these messages like, "Hey, are you guys joining? What's happening?" I'm like,
Guys.
"Oh no, I forgot about the one person who's working from home right now," right?
Yeah.
So that's been an interesting thing to wrestle with through this. But you know, I talk about Windsor a lot. I'm in Windsor. You're in Vancouver. You know, every time you come to town, I'm trying to act as tour guide, right? And here's Amherstburg, and here's Lakeshore, right? Let's drive to the waterfront. I'm curious from you, what are some of the benefits outside of it just being an overall beautiful place that you think Edison has by being set up for the most part in Windsor Essex?
This is a question I get asked a lot, and I've definitely done some thinking on it. In fact, I had a LinkedIn post on this topic, and actually ended up doing a guest blog post on the WEtech blog. And so for some of those that have read that, and I'll apologize, I'll repeat myself, but I think the points are worth making here again. For us, some of the drivers were, number one, proximity to Detroit was immense. In particular, because we're in the mortgage business, and Detroit has got this incredible dynamic as the core of mortgage in the United States, both Quicken Loans or Rocket companies and others. So number one, having access to that brain trust has been immense. Not just the people there, but people like yourself and a number of others on our team who lived in Windsor, were crossing the border every day. And in really ways, we're really actually passionate about bringing some of that experience to their hometown and building a business right in Windsor. I think that's been such a strong part of some of our recruiting, and not just people that would cross the border, but people that live here. Maybe that's sort of really item number two, talent. I think there's a sort of a sense that that the talent is in Vancouver, Toronto, or San Francisco, or something like that. And while I definitely think that there's no doubting there's a greater concentration of talent in some of these bigger cities, I think especially as you get more and more specialized. There's this really amazing podcast between Toby Lutke and Shane Parrish on the Knowledge Project. Both of whom are actually based in Ottawa, funny enough. And Toby's talking about the difference between hiring in Ottawa versus others, and I think this totally applies to Windsor, which is to say that that you tend to have to hire people that are more junior and have less experience, but as a result, they're cheaper, which is a factor, and then you get to invest in them and actually build up their experience over time with the company. He said people tend to stay much longer, which I think makes sense. I think that in markets like highly competitive markets like Vancouver or Toronto, I think a lot of people can sometimes become mercenaries. They're two years at some place, 3 years, they vest and they move on. Whereas I find in towns like Ottawa or Windsor, you have a greater level of commitment and tenure. People grow with the company, they have more context. So you have this different dynamic, where you might have a lack of some very specialized roles. You have the ability to identify talent and then develop those skills in people that are more committed to the business. So, and on top of that, there's a passion I find for people in Windsor to invest and build the city of Windsor in a way that just doesn't exist in the city of Vancouver. People like the city of Vancouver, but they don't have the same passion for putting it on the map and making an impact that I see in Windsor, which I find is really, really powerful. Another item is affordability. It's actually kind of funny. I was out for drinks with some of the team members, and people were like mid-20s, and they're lamenting how hard it is to buy a home in Windsor now and how the prices have gone up. And while certainly they have gone up a lot, it was somewhat funny to me because the conversation in Vancouver is so much more extreme. The average price of a single detached home in Vancouver is like 1.9 million now. So you have people in your 40s and 50s wondering if they're ever going to be able to buy a house. And the fact that many young people in Windsor can, with a good job, some savings, maybe support from family, can get on the housing ladder can own property, can build, is actually such a big boon. It allows people to set down roots and have hope for the future. Whereas, that sort of fear is a big challenge for businesses. How do I retain people? How do I attract them to the city when it's so expensive to live? I think that in a world where talent is increasingly mobile and where the quality of life can be great just about anywhere, I think that affordability is going to be a huge advantage. So those are just some of the things. There are certainly others, but I think that there's a lot of potential here, or there, I guess.
Yeah, most definitely. Can't wait to have you in town next. But I do want to mention, I think you've given so many good answers there. One of the things that probably would not be as accessible in a Toronto or Vancouver are the relationships that we have here locally, right? Like I think about WEtech, I think about Invest Windsor Essex, right? I think about even the mayor's office. You can go down the line. Everything is 1 degree of separation if someone's not a direct contact.
Yeah.
And you can pretty much get anyone on the phone that you need to within a couple of hours to help you on a problem, right? And that we found, like some of the working relationships we already have in a short, year and a half, the amount of hand raisers that are like, hey, what can we do for you guys?
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't even know, right? But we'll think of something. But
I'm smiling because you're so right. You said you're my tour guide, but you're like my hookup guy, where it's like between you, Joe, and Serena, I feel like we can pretty much reach anyone in the city.
Yeah, 1 degree of separation if you don't know them. And actually, every time we bring somebody onto the team, especially here in Windsor, like it's inevitable. Somebody's doing like a Facebook or Instagram search on this person, and they're like, "Oh, went to my high school."
Yeah.
It's that small, and that part I love. It does appear like we have a hand up from Yvonne. Yvonne, did you have a question at this time? Yvonne, are you out there?
The person that has a question could also, maybe if we're having technical difficulties, should just type it in the chat, and then we could answer it that way.
Okay, very well. For now, if it's okay, I'm going to ask you another question.
Sure.
Hash. Let's keep rolling with it. What's the best piece of advice for a founder or an entrepreneur, in your opinion? And maybe it's something you're, waffling around in your head lately, one of those wish you knew type things. But what would you tell somebody who's getting started?
This is going to maybe come across as really cliche, but it's been very true for us in a different kind of way. And that's just to listen to your clients or prospective clients. I think that if you read a book like Inspired, around product discovery, it starts off with this idea of there's answers are outside the building. People don't just come up with ideas in a vacuum. They're talking to prospective clients, understanding their problems. So that is such a great way to get started, just to listen to people, understand their needs. Now, it doesn't work perfectly in the sense that there's that old adage, if you ask people what they wanted, they would have told you a faster horse, not an automobile. So people don't ask for the iPhone. It doesn't work for everything, but for many opportunities, either people starting out or even people in the existing business, listening to their clients is so impactful. And I'll give you an example of that. One of the best things that we did at Edison early on was to invest in our data infrastructure. And that is another way in which we listen to our clients. We can't talk to every client, but what we do see through their actions is where they engage with us, where they don't. And by leveraging that data, we can listen to what's working and what's not working. And the biggest impact it has is that, for example, a mortgage takes 3 to 4 months from initial lead to close a lot of the time. So if we had to wait 3 to 4 months every time we ran a test and make a change, we might really only be able to make 3 or 4 changes a year. And that's not very fast. But with really, really good data, rather than waiting 3 to 4 months, we can essentially listen to what people are telling us within a week or two. And what that means is that rather than running 3 or 4 tests a year, we can run 26 or 52 tests a year. And what that also refers to is our pace of evolution. And even if other businesses have a head start, the business that can adapt more quickly and evolve more quickly ultimately is going to win. And so by having that ability to have a really attuned ear to the ground and listen to what clients are telling you, you can adjust course and evolve and improve your product so much faster. And that just has an incredible impact on velocity.
That's a great one. I think back to the early days of starting the business. Like, that was so important to us, right? Was the ability to extract information without having to wait long periods of time, right? Knowing and understanding your business, understanding your clients, right? Asking questions. Something I think that we've done well is ask a lot from our clients in terms of feedback. There are probably some people that are even watching this right now that have done their mortgages through us already to this point, right? And they're probably thinking back to, like, me, like, how are we doing? How are we doing? How are we doing? Right? Like, it was maybe annoying in a way, like maybe too much. Like, oh, I heard so-and-so called you to get an updated document on this. Were they nice? How did they sound, right? What was the upload process like? What was the e-signature process feeling like to you? Like, does it feel very first world? Does it feel like a digital front? And gathering that information early on was key. I know that since the start of the business, we've been really focused on improving our flywheel. So I'm gonna throw this one at you as well, Hash, before we open up to questions. And for those who do have questions, I would love to see people start throwing them in the Q&A while we wrap on about this last piece here. But when you think about that flywheel for Edison, and thanks to Jim Collins, right? For those of you who have not read that, what do you think of the Edison flywheel? What does the Edison flywheel entail? And when do you think it starts to hit that pivotal motion where it's moving fast and it's unstoppable?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Jim Collins. Again, another great series of books, a great call. Also,
you always refer to him as Jim.
Jim.
Just Jim. You're on a first name basis.
I'm on a first name basis with Jim.
Yeah.
He had a really great podcast with Shane, not Shane Perron on our team, but Shane Parrish, also on a first name basis.
Yeah, he's Canadian.
Agreed, from Ottawa. So you're totally right. That flywheel is one of the first things that we talked about and really tried to formulate, because I think it's sort of this basic anchor when we think about our business, and we often come back to it and it's the same thing. It shouldn't change. It's kind of like physics. It's the sort of underlying explanation of why things should work. And the very first step on that flywheel is delivering great service. It's really the defining element of Edison. And the idea of a flywheel, as some people might know, is this idea that it's a series of steps where if you do one step well, it will inexorably lead you to the next step. Like it should be defined in such a way that if you do the first step well, it will lead to the second step. And if you do that next step well, it will lead to the step after, in a series of sort of steps that eventually come back to the original step. And if you continue to do each one well, it will allow you to drive your flywheel around. And initially it's slow like a flywheel and it doesn't really make that much of an impact, but the faster and faster you go, eventually it builds up momentum. And one day everyone wakes up and wonder how this overnight success occurred. And people try to imitate it, not really realizing that it takes years and thousands of revolutions before it has that momentum. So for Edison, it's step number one, deliver great service. And then step two from that is, if we deliver great service, that will allow us to grow our business. By growing our business, that gives us economies of scale, which again, as we talked about, is important for the business. With greater scale and size, that will drive additional insights into our business. Because again, to this point about the velocity of evolution, we know that there are many things to solve, but I can't tell you today everything that will need to be solved. But by getting bigger, by having more agents, each of whom are giving us feedback on what's working, what's not working, what clients like, what clients don't like, we can accelerate the pace of our learning. By accelerating the pace of our learning, we can basically get better at our business, which I call economies of learning. And that's essential, because in a world where digital marketing is basically, it's like a global storefront, right? Everyone's on the same sidewalk. It's owned by Google and Facebook, and we're all competing for the same set of pedestrians. it heightens the level of competition. And so in order to compete there, you have to get better and better all the time. And if you're just a small store learning 1 or 2 clients at a time, you're going to lose out to the company that's learning faster. So that's where size leads to learning and insights. You apply those learnings, you get economies of learning, and those improvements allow you to basically attract more customers and more people on your team, which allows you again to deliver great service and so on and so forth back around. So that's Edison's flywheel. It's been the same since day one, continues to apply. We use it as kind of this philosophy, I guess, when we're thinking about where we get stuck, because one of the key parts of the flywheel is if you fail to do any one step well, it stops spinning. You can't just skip one and be like, nah, we're gonna skip this step on this turn. It stops your momentum. You have to do each one well in order to get that momentum.
That's really, really well said. I was asked the question, actually, this is just this past week, what's one of the biggest benefits for me for working with rocket companies for years, right, prior to being a part of the startup team at Edison? And my answer was, I know 1,000 ways not to do this, right? And it's to say that I don't have the answer for sure, but through those economies of learning and doing it so many different ways, you figure out all the ways that don't work. One thing that we probably haven't done a great job at Hash, and maybe this is an opportunity that's evolving for us through this podcast here, or this performance, or whatever you want to call it, is that we probably haven't done a good enough job recording all of the decisions we've made along the way, right? In the essence of like Annie Duke thinking in bets, it's easy to look back and say, mistake, wrong decision, right? But like in that moment, what was going on? Here's sort of this fork in the road that we were faced with, and here's why we went this way. And then thinking back on the decision-making process to what got us to what we do today, which will probably change again in 3 months.
You're so right. Sometimes I think we can forget why we, like, even within the span of 2 years, we can forget why we decided to do something one way. That knowledge is lost. We don't get the benefit of improving our decision-making. That type of institutional knowledge is key. So I totally agree with you. Recording those decisions is so valuable.
Awesome. So it looks like some questions are coming through the Q&A. At a quick glance, a lot of them look to be around this subject. So it's obviously top of mind for many folks. First question here we have is there something you wish you would have done differently if you could do it all over again?
Within Edison or in life?
Life would open up a whole bag of wings. Let's stick to Edison here.
Something I wish I would have done differently. I think that I mean, there's so many things. I think that early on we scaled and we tried to scale very, very quickly, and we basically just burned a lot of cash really pursuing rapid growth before we had refined the basics of our business model. You know, everything from hiring to lead acquisition, lead rationing, you know, our follow-up cadence, all these things, we basically tried to just pour gas on the fire before basically making sure that it had the right oxygen and the right layout. And you could sort of see it in our numbers where there's a sort of rapid growth. You know, our burn rapidly increased, our contribution margin was way off. And it took a lot of effort to stop. And because when you're in that growth mode, it takes a lot of conviction to say, we're gonna stop doing this, because as a startup, so much of your equity, your story is tied up in that growth rate. To pause and refactor everything, reinforce the foundation, take the learnings, took a lot of effort. And I think while we learned from it immensely, I think that you know, had we, I think, just been a little bit more careful, we would be even further today than we were. And that's a lesson learned. I think that again, the benefit of that data is we don't have to let it get it as far next time before we maybe pause again if we get a little ahead of our skis.
You just reminded me of pretty much me in the summertime when I try to do bonfires, and I'm like graham crackers, chocolate, marshmallows set on the table. Time to start the fire. Time to start the fire. Time to start the fire. It's not working. And then I usually need to like get help from like a neighbor or something like that, because it's like not my forte. And yeah, luckily we haven't had to call a neighbor to help us in yet, but it certainly has made it more difficult at times, right?
Our neighbor
scale through it.
Does peek over that fence, that giant border fence every once in a while, ask what the hell we're doing over here.
Well, they always say don't use a lighter fluid, right? If you're gonna cook, and then you have to wait forever. And then I'm like, just put some lighter fluid on it. Let's get this fire started. It's gonna be fine. So what are some of the key ingredients you're looking for in a thriving in building a thriving startup community? I'm assuming this is referring to, or maybe we'll just use Windsor as an example, right? And I know one of the things that we're passionate about is helping out other early stage tech companies, and giving them, some support, place they feel safe, a place that they feel like there's other talent, and guidance to lean on. So what are some of the key ingredients in your mind to getting that going?
There's no sort of simple recipe list here. I think there's been much discussion about how do places recreate, that Silicon Valley effect. And while there's no, surefire way to do it, there certainly are, I think, some common elements. And I'm by no means an expert in this, but certainly have seen versions of it in my short career. One of them is of course this density of startups, where you have this community, this exchange of ideas, this sort of what makes cities so great broadly. It happens on steroids with a startup community where they tend to be around the same spot. They're sharing ideas, they're attracting capital, they're giving people the confidence to start new businesses. That kind of dynamic where you have an exchange of ideas is so potent. And I think that's one thing so far that Windsor appears to be missing, that sort of, kind of formerly rundown part of town where rent is cheap and startups move in, and they all seem to have brick backgrounds where they take profile photos on. But kind of creating that
alleyways for the win. Yeah,
exactly. I think that's a key element. Another one is almost definitely when you have existing successful companies and founders, not necessarily in tech, but it could be in any field, but people that have that entrepreneurial spirit, feeding their success back into the community, whether through capital or mentorship or any form. That's also another key part. That kind of recycling of experience and talent is essential. And a third one, which I think is really incredibly powerful and is not fully utilized, is where institutions like a city or a province, or it could even be a health organization, these large organizations I talked about listening to your customers. They are the customers, and we're not even listening to them. They're literally announcing, I have this problem. I've got a problem with traffic, with healthcare costs, with data, whatever the case might be. Announcing that problem and say, almost running a competition for the company that can solve this. I will be the first customer. And if you think about it, this truly incredible outcome with COVID vaccines is basically an example of that on steroids, right? Like mRNA technology has been around for a while. Moderna had been around for a while, but it actually took the pandemic and basically a bunch of governments saying, we will buy, $1 trillion worth of vaccines. And like, lo and behold, 7 vaccines are invented within 9 months. Like, it's actually really incredible.
Yeah.
That's an extreme example, but
sort of that Medici effect, right? Of like, totally. Come here, we will help you, we will listen to you, we will put you around other people who are like-minded and want to do something amazing, right? And then, not in the general sense, but like an incubator almost, totally. Right? an incubator of minds. So I think that's where we'll leave that one. I think you've given a lot right there. So we have a question here from Dustin Vermast. I'd be remiss if I didn't get to it, since he's a team member of ours. He asked about the philosophy that Edison believes in. Do you grow to hire, or do you hire to grow?
I would say that we hire to grow, almost certainly. Early on, we had this informal policy that if we connected with a really talented person, even if we didn't have a role for them, we would try to grab them and make sure they were part of our business, because they would absolutely make an impact, and they absolutely have. I can think of a number of examples of that. And our team is the key engine of our business. I mean, as much as we are a technology business, we are very much also a fintech, a financial business, and mortgages are not one today where you could just swap out, where people are willing to do their entire mortgage with technology alone. And so hiring, people development, building teams, that is such a core part of our business. And we absolutely are hiring as many of the best people as we can in order to grow.
Great. I'll do one more then, and I actually utilize some of what you just talked about, which is the culture piece, right? I think we talk about a lot of the strategy behind our business. We just got a great question on growth as well, but I think what drives a lot of it for us is culture. I've been around it for nearly a decade now. You're a couple years with the Rocket family of companies, Hash. When you were sort of integrated into the culture of the family of companies, and now getting even closer to it, and really being, one of the major voices of it within, what does the family of companies culture mean to you? And in our world, we call them isms, right? But what has that done for you as a leader, and just as an individual in life?
I'm actually gonna maybe turn this one around on you, because I feel like in many ways you are definitely better equipped to answer. I definitely have a thought, but I'm actually really curious to get your thoughts on it.
Okay, I'm not ready. But I have answered some variations of this question before. Often what I equate our isms to, and anybody could look them up, they're readily available online. They're things like do the right thing, and it's not about who is right, it's about what is right, or money and numbers follow, they do not lead. The series of guiding principles that help you make decisions, that help you lead a fruitful life, a meaningful life, help you be a better team member, help you be a better family member and friend. And often what I tell people is that these aren't things that you come into the organization and have some crazy realization that, like, oh my gosh, like, do the right thing, it totally makes sense, I should be a better person, right? They're things, and really they're values that are instilled in good people early on. But when you join the family of companies and you read the isms for the first time, it's the first time you've seen them just laid out in such a beautiful way, with words and explanations behind everyone. And many of them come directly from our founder, Dan Gilbert. And as you read them, you find yourself on that yes train, where it's like, yes, like that totally makes sense. Like I actually, that's how I go about doing this, right? Or, maybe it's something that you've looked at it a different way, and you're pretty aligned. I know there's a few for you that you're like, I wasn't so sure about this one when I first started, but like now I'm slowly getting it, and it's like ingrained in our culture, and it makes sense, right? So again, going back to the major point, it's just, they're not things that reinvent you as a human being. They're things that affirm you as a human being and the value set that you carry. And I feel like if you carry those values, it's not just success inside the Rocket family of companies. Really, it could lead to success anywhere, and anyone can use them.
I think that's very, very, very well said. And I love hearing your perspective on it, having, again, sort of reading so widely, with so many talented, entrepreneurs and founders and biographies, and sort of still, the value that you see in the isms. And I mean, I'll admit, when I first joined, they seemed a little propaganda-y to me. When you first join, you're like, all right, everyone's got these slogans or whatever. But I very quickly
culty. You could say it.
A little bit, for sure.
Yeah.
But what I really came to appreciate, this idea of having a shared language, not everyone has to agree with them, but this idea that if people don't agree with them, then maybe they should work somewhere else. Not because that they're wrong, but just because, we all agree that this is a place where we believe that yes before no is the right approach. That a leader approaching their team with this mindset of, it's not always yes, but it is yes before no. And that means that I'm not going to shut down someone's idea just because I'm too busy or because I like my idea more. Having that shared language where we hold ourselves accountable to these principles that are, like you said, they're not so unique. Some of them are quite common, but it's our set of shared principles. We hold ourselves to them. We have a shared language with which to make decisions. That's what makes them really potent. And I think it's an incredible way for any business to maybe sort of think through. They can adopt these isms, they can have their own, but they make this shared language and they try to enforce them in their day-to-day, especially as the business grows. You or I can't be in every conversation, but we can be confident that whatever conversation is going on, people are going to believe that doing the right thing is the right way to go. And that yes before no is the right way to be a leader, and sort of any host of different isms.
Nailed it. So I'm being told we have a couple minutes for a few more questions. Let's get back into the fashion of rapid fire here. What's your personal biggest business failure, and what did you learn from it?
Okay, so this is actually an interesting plot twist. The actual original Edison business. So Edison was actually first founded in 2017. Not everyone knows this, and it was a digital brokerage as well, but it was focused on the private mortgage space, and it wasn't the biggest business failure in the sense that it was a massive financial loss, but it actually was a real lesson in business dynamics, which is to say that that business was so focused on the private mortgage space, which represents maybe 2 to 5% of the total mortgage industry. And the idea was to use digital marketing essentially to connect with customers and offer them what would at the time have been a very analog, old school industry, specialized mortgage brokers that help do that, and basically connect clients directly with lenders. The reason why it didn't work was, digital, it was really hard to identify those 2 to 5% of clients that needed a private mortgage. And you end up basically paying full freight for a mortgage lead, and you couldn't use 95% of those clients. So the economics totally didn't work. And, in time, I'm sure we would have pivoted. And, I ended up sort of putting that Edison on hold, joining Lendesk, and then Edison was reborn, basically focused on the prime market. But that really stark realization that, go-to-market strategy needs to make sense, running a test to try to identify, can I appropriately find that 2% of clients that I need with marketing, or am I going to get drowned out by the noise and basically get outbid by the 98%? It was a fantastic lesson in what does work and what doesn't work in digital marketing, go-to-market strategy, and a whole host of things.
That's a great answer. Do you see yourself starting another company in the future?
I'm
going to preface this question. It doesn't mean like no Edison. I don't. It says anonymous attendees. I'm not sure who asked it. So, honest answer when it comes to like startup businesses. Like, could you see yourself going at it again?
I would say maybe. I'm gonna say hopefully not, in the sense that I think some people like the start. They love the idea of starting a business, and then when it gets to a certain spot, they get bored and move on. That's not me necessarily. I would love to never have to start a business again, not because I don't enjoy it, but I would love to experience the process of scaling Edison to be a market leader, to go through those evolutions of from a startup to a growth stage business to a established enterprise. Each new phase bringing new challenges and sort of seeing that legacy. Again, going back to our friend Jim, built to last.
Your friend Jim.
I can introduce you to him.
Please.
Our friend. Having a business that's built to last would be equally as rewarding for me as it would be to start another business. So if that doesn't happen for whatever reason, there's definitely going to be another business started. But if this one ends up being the one that is sort of a massive success, then that would be okay too.
Sometimes I view it as a trick question, because I think actually, even as an established business, you're almost always starting new businesses inside your business.
Totally.
Really, I think of like almost every business line as a product, right? And if you're not consistently rolling out new products, which in some essence are new businesses, consistently, you won't be around very long, right? Yeah. So even in our business today, the outside world, they see Edison Financial. When I look inside of our business, I see like 30 different businesses that are taking place right now, right? Yeah. I'm personally, working with our teams to like try to funnel off all these different businesses within our business. And to me, that's part of the joy, and actually part of being a part of a large organization that's extremely well backed. For that, I know we're always thankful. It affords you the ability to like go out and try things, right? Consistently, and fail sometimes. And that's okay, because maybe the other 96 businesses are doing just fine right now, right? And that I think is an important factor to remember as well. So I think whether you believe it or not, you've always got this sick affinity for starting over.
I think that's actually a brilliant point. And Amazon Story is such a great example of that. And there's a podcast called the Founders Podcast, where he just reads through all of the Amazon's annual reports. And that concept is so true. This idea of constantly launching new businesses in pretty diverse areas, like the Kindle, the Fire Phone wasn't necessarily as successful, but sort of parlayed them into other stuff. Obviously, Amazon Web Services, fulfillment by Amazon, launching these businesses within the business. I think that's such a brilliant point.
Awesome. One more, Hash. So what do you like about Founders Week? And ultimately, when you think about, Founders Week YQG, something that we're, part of, and I'm having a little fun with this right now. What would be the perfect week for Founders Week YQG, in your opinion, or some things that we could potentially do in the future that would make the event even better?
One of the things that I like about Founders Week, or events like Founders Week in general, is that often I find when I take a break out of my day as an attendee to listen to talks, for some reason, it's where I do my best thinking. And sometimes I'm literally half listening to the speaker, half listening to the presentation, but while that's going on, it's kind of like being in the shower. Ideas just sort of start to flow, you kind of get inspired. And so I think that taking time out of our days to participate in stuff like this, it's this cool forum to get us to kind of reflect and let those ideas bubble up. So that, I think, is one of the most powerful ideas behind it. Connecting with people in the community, understanding what's going on, making connections. I think that's the most valuable. And in terms of what I think are some of maybe the best outcome from Founders Week, is that Edison and WEtech are working to really have this vision of trying to create a tech hub in downtown Windsor. Not sure what that looks like yet, but being able to leverage, this event and some of the people that we're meeting to make that happen. Those entrepreneurs that are out there, I know Yvonne and the entire WEtech team are big, passionate backers of this. And I think that would be an amazing outcome if we can make that happen.
Wonderful. I completely agree. We'll leave it right there. yes on more founders, yes on more entrepreneurs, yes on more technology talent and growth in Windsor Essex, specifically my backyard. We are growing, we are hiring. We are fortunate to be led by Aboulhosn, our president. So thanks, Hash, for the interview, and thanks for everyone who listened in. Back to you, Sharia.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hash and Bekim, for joining us today and sharing your founder's journey. And I speak on behalf of the WEtech team and the Founders Week YQG team that we can't wait to celebrate your continued growth and success. So just a quick note to all of our attendees, I did post our survey in the chat, so please click on the link to provide feedback for this session. This will enter you for a session giveaway to win $50 Windsor card. And the more sessions you provide feedback for, the more entries you have in the final draw. And just before we head over to our next session, I'd just like to do a quick screenshot picture. So if our speakers here could give me a quick smile in 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Thank you. And yeah, just a reminder to all our attendees, our next IP strategy workshop is beginning in the next 60 seconds. And just make sure you don't miss out on Town Hall tonight and Failure Night on Friday night. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.